This short video is an introduction to Attic Inscriptions Online, saying a little bit about the aims of the project and about how the website works. I'll start with some essentials. The website now holds over 2,000 translated Attic inscriptions, together with notes and other supporting material. It's managed by an editorial committee, Stephen Lambert, Peter Liddle, Chris DeLille and myself, Polly Lowe. We're supported by an IT team, by a large group of volunteer translators and by an international advisory board. And we're also home to related projects, Attic Inscriptions in the UK, probably self-explanatory, but it's a project which is locating and producing new editions of all the Attic inscriptions currently located in the United Kingdom, and Attic Inscriptions Education, and I'll say a bit more about that at the end of this video. The site was created in 2012 by Stephen Lambert, who'd identified a problem of accessibility, or rather of inaccessibility. Greek inscriptions, as Stephen notes in the soundbite on this slide, are an extremely valuable source for the Greek historian, but they're also a source which is often very hard for a Greek historian to use, particularly a school or undergraduate level student who might not know ancient Greek. Very few Greek inscriptions before AIO were available in translation. There's also a problem of accessibility in terms of the places in which Greek inscriptions were published, in large, difficult printed corpora that a non-specialist user would often find really very hard to know what to do with. So the goal of AIO was to make inscriptions more accessible. Stephen's founding principles in a bit more detail are summed up here. So at the core of the project, as I've said, making translated, annotated texts of Athenian inscriptions freely available, with the option for the user who wants to see some key terms as transliteration, so difficult to translate or untranslatable terms can be presented in transliterated form. A very important point is that we always try to offer the most authoritative edition or work from the most authoritative edition of an inscription, which is often the most recent edition. But we're very aware that many people won't have the most recent reference. That if you're reading an article published 10, 20, 30 years ago and finding a reference to an inscription in that, you need to be able to follow up that reference and get to our translation, and we'll see in a moment how that's possible. The goal of the site is to complement rather than duplicate other online resources. So if other people have put a resource online, then we link to it rather than put our own resource up there. And the goal from the start was that the site should develop dynamically, and we'll see in a minute some ways that that's happened. So here is a standard entry on AIO. It's Rhodes Osborne 58, an Athenian decree from the middle of the 4th century. You can see in the main part of the screen the translation of the text with notes explaining, elucidating complicated or contested areas of the text, and the notes are presented on the right-hand side of the screen, just at the bottom on this slide. Also on the right-hand side of the screen, a bit further up, you'll see the list of references. There you can see that the text translated here is the most recent one in IG2 cubed, but probably most people wanting to look at this text would come to it with the Rhodes Osborne reference, and they would be able to do so. So if someone searched for Rhodes Osborne 58 on AIO, they'd come here, and in fact if they searched for any of those half dozen or more references on the right-hand side of the screen, all of those references would bring them to this entry. So that's still at the core of the site. Since 2012, we've added more things. We've added more ways to access texts by browsing by category or by type of inscription, by type of monument and by location. We've added links to and sometimes provision of Greek texts. So to go back to Rhodes Osborne 58, you can see again on the right-hand side links to the Greek text on PHI and on IG Online. In cases where we ourselves have produced an edition of a text, then we host that Greek text on AIO itself. So here's a slightly unusual example, a 17th century inscription, a fake inscription, now in the Ashmolean. We've got the English translation and notes, as with the regular entry, but the Greek text, because it's our own edition of the Greek text, is hosted on AIO. We've added place information via Pleiades, so someone who wants to know where Athens is, where Delphi is, where Eleusis is, can follow those links from the inscription entry. We've added images. Again, most often links to images which are hosted elsewhere. So here, links to squeezes in Cornell and in Princeton, but sometimes where we have our own images, they're hosted on the site. And last and not least, we've added supporting materials. AIO and AIO UK papers are, for the most part, slightly more academic publications aimed at people who want to dig into some of the texts in more detail than we provide on the website. We have a YouTube channel which aims to offer more accessible introductions to individual inscriptions or sets of inscriptions. And we've produced, most recently, a set of resources aimed especially at UK schools, from primary right through to year 12, year 13, trying to show ways in which inscriptions can be built into different sorts of classroom activities and tied as closely as we can to the UK school curriculum. I mentioned at the start that many people are involved in Attic Inscriptions Online. This isn't a complete list of people who've contributed in various ways to the project, but it does, I think, give a sense of how very collaborative this project is, and also how international the participation in the project is. And it's thanks to all of these people and more that Attic Inscriptions Online has been able to become, we hope, such a useful and valuable resource.